Welcome to the Inspired Conversations podcast, hosted by me, Andrea Cova-Bernal. As a college counselor, I'm inspired not only by the incredible students I work with, but also by remarkable change makers in higher education, each with powerful stories of their own. Through storytelling and shared narratives, I believe in the power of connection. Join me as we delve into dialogue and share valuable advice for college success. Hello. Hello, everyone. As folks are dropping in, welcome to the very first Inspired Conversation live podcast. This is an interactive conversation where you see myself as well as Professor Mora in front of you. I do want to share a little bit more about the mission behind Inspired Conversation, but most importantly, I want to get to the stories, which is the true heart of why we're here. Students who are tuned in right now, I also want you all to have the opportunity to ask questions about your experience with the application process, as well as financial aid, or even the student experience. I think we come with two very special perspectives as a former student, as well as a now tenured professor. Congratulations, Professor Mora.
Thank you.
With that, let me share a little bit more about why we're here. So Inspired Conversations was essentially a dream sort of splintered off of an old podcast I created a few years ago, where I started sharing stories from students who were incredible leaders and thought change makers in the city of Los Angeles. I realized then how important and impactful storytelling is. And at the same time, I was meeting admissions professionals, professors like Professor Mora today, folks who were behind the scenes and reading applications, who also had powerful stories of their own. These are folks who are teaching you on a daily basis. So with that said, that's why Inspired Conversations was started. It is a space for students, you to ask questions, and for us to engage in a dialogue about what it means to be a minority, a woman, a change maker, a social justice advocate in the world of higher ed. And students, I feel you wouldn't be here right now if you didn't also believe in those values as well. So before I get into introducing Professor Mora, I just want to introduce a few things. As I mentioned, this is an interactive podcast where it is being recorded. You feel free to react to any of the conversation today by using the reactions buttons below. So if something resonates with you, if you feel empowered, if you feel excited by the conversation, you can click on reactions and let us know. Additionally, if you have any questions, students, partners, families, parents who I know are here, counselors, please drop them in the chat box as we will get to a Q&A later. So without further ado, I want to pass it on to Professor Mora. We are going to get into your story and your education in a little bit. But before we do, can you just introduce yourself in the context of Oxy? Who you are, what do you do at Oxy, and then why do you believe spaces of storytelling exist? Why are these important?
Okay, so first, Andrea, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. So I'm super excited to be here. I think what you're doing is amazing. So in terms of who I am, I'm a professor at Occidental College. I teach economics. My focus has been on international economics, looking at developing countries, sort of been a passion of mine, basically because of my background. I spent about 9 years in Mexico, most of my childhood there, and coming here as an immigrant and learning, speaking only Spanish at that time, had a huge impact on me, right? And so for me, economics is just fascinating, and that's what I love to teach. At Oxy, I teach, I advise, I do research. I'm also known as for having a TikTok account. So that has been the newest thing I've been doing. And in terms of what you're doing and hearing stories, and to me, sort of, I think of it as mentors, because I felt like when I was in college, I didn't really have mentors or people that looked like me or spoke like me that would somewhat guide me through the process. I didn't even really need guidance. What I needed is someone to know that, like, just so that I saw someone do it. That way I could know, like, oh, if someone that speaks like me, looks like me, came from a similar background, did it, it just seems more likely that I could do it. as opposed to being, all my professors were white, male, and all the people sitting around me, the same thing. I went to a predominantly white institution, a liberal arts college. And so to me, what was missing and what was so difficult was not to have any sort of mentors. And so to me, I love hearing stories of people like me, and I love sharing my story just so that there could be someone sitting down there and be like, well, if this guy did it, maybe I can do it too. So that's why I like what you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that I heard from you too was, I think I tell my students this all the time, if I would have known then what I know now, right, in this experience. But one thing that I also want to encourage to the students, while especially if you're a senior in this space and you're making a decision about college, is, thinking about these things. Is the space that you are about to select for the 4 years of your life a space where you envision yourself, where you can see people who look like you and are surrounded by you, have the same morals and values as you? And even if it doesn't, how does that space allow or open you, or allow you, the opportunity to use your voice in a positive way? That's really important. So a little bit about me, y'all. I just want to share a little bit about my story. I was raised in New Mexico. So shout out to anybody here who is from the 505. But one thing that I think both of my parents really taught me growing up is this idea of leaving to learn. My dad is from Caracas, Venezuela, and my mom is from a tiny town in northern New Mexico, sort of off the map. Nobody knows where it is. And both of them were inspired enough by education to leave their home, to leave their family. My dad came all the way from Venezuela to get his education. My mom left her tiny town in northern New Mexico where everybody stayed, and instead she left to get an education. And so one thing that they always taught me was this idea of, sometimes you have to leave what is close to home, what you feel is in your comfort zone, to have an experience that will change your life. And so if that's always resonated with me, I've always sort of believed that even though they might be 40 minutes away or across the country, that regardless of where they are going to be here no matter what. So I do truly believe in the idea of leaving to learn, but I also truly believe in the beauty of liberal arts education for the power of community. One thing that Oxy was able to introduce me to was exploration. I thought I wanted to do one thing when I started Oxy, which was be a psychologist. And I had every intention of doing that. And then I changed my mind because of the classes I was exposed to at a space like Oxy. Not only that, I didn't need to make a decision about my major until the second year of college. They allowed me the opportunity to explore, take classes that interested me and excited me before making a final decision about what I was going to study. So for me, it's leaving to learn and it's exploration. What about for you, Professor Mora? Can you share a little bit more about your educational journey and what sort of shaped all of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's funny you mentioned your parents, because I agree. Like, parents have a huge impact on what you end up doing. And it doesn't really matter your parents' education, just to be sure that I make that clear. My parents, my mom didn't finish elementary school. My dad didn't finish middle school, but they understood the importance of education. So to me, they've always had this thing about, education. And it's funny, I don't know if like my intentions are as pure as yours. When I was younger, my parents, we grow strawberries, so we're farmers. And so I would go and pick strawberries and work in the strawberry field in Ontario, 909, very close to here, where it gets very, very hot during the summer. And my father would always say, stay in school or you're going to be working in the field. So to me, that was the main driver, that I saw my parents working, and they would work so hard for us and to create a better life for us. But the work was just really, really hard, and it didn't pay that much, right? So to me, it just didn't seem right. And so the reason I stuck to education was because, to me, honestly, that just seemed like an easier job, to be in an air-conditioned office like I am right now, to be sitting on my desk rather than bent over picking strawberries. And so that was the big driver for me, right? It was just trying to change that life, give myself a better chance. And then my parents were able to do that. They gave me, even though they didn't have the education, they didn't have money, they weren't able to help me with my homework, but I didn't have to drop out of school for them either, which is what my parents had to do. They had to drop out. Part of it was to work, and they were migrant workers. So that's sort of how it was back then. And so my parents gave me this opportunity, and I took it, and I've ran with it since, and I haven't looked back. And so to me, that was the main thing that drove me to be in school. And then in terms of looking at a liberal arts education, to be honest with you, I also didn't know what a liberal arts education, and maybe some people sitting here may not know what a liberal arts education. And so to me, it was just luck that I ended up in a liberal arts education, if I'm being very honest. The school that I went to was a liberal arts, and they gave me money, more money than Cal Poly and Riverside and all these other schools, Fullerton, that I applied to. And so that was the main reason that I did that, out of luck. But I consider myself very lucky for that. And I tell people now that if you have the chance to go to liberal arts, I'm all pushing for it. Like, it's just the experience you're going to get. It's not compatible. You're never going to receive the type of attention at a sort of major, large institution. So, and whoever's listening to this, think very hard about whether you want to go to a large institution or a small institution. I think for many of us who are first gen, going to a large institution is very easy to get lost, right? And if you don't have the right support group, you're going to get lost. You're more likely to drop out than if you go to a small institution where the professor knows your name, they know who you are, they know when you don't show up to class. They'll make TikToks about you, like I did for one of my students that didn't show up to class. But the experience is very different. It's not only about the education that you get in the classroom, it's the experiences you get outside of the classroom, the studying abroad, the doing research with professors, leaving the community, getting out into the community, learning from the community, and benefiting from being in a place like LA. And so I really cannot speak highly enough about liberal arts education, and especially here at Occidental College. But I can go on and on about this. This is Andrea's podcast. So Andrea, I'll take it back.
I actually love what you said, though, because you mentioned first of all, you mentioned the small class sizes, but you also mentioned there are not very many small liberal arts colleges like Oxy in the heart of a big city. And
That's
so
right.
we have, at least from my experience, I felt like the community was my oyster, as they say. I could do research in the community. I explored in the community. I worked in the community. I didn't feel secluded in my college, in the one space that I called home. And so, but not only that, as you mentioned, financial aid was a big part of it. I felt like when there was an issue, when I had questions, I could walk into the financial aid office or admissions office and ask them very freely and know somebody was there to answer my questions. But to you, as from a professor's perspective, I was also able to, email my professor and say, you know what, I'm really sick today. I'm not feeling it. I feel really, under the weather. How can I get supported in the assignments? And it was a completely welcome response. Like, we get it. We understand. We don't want to see you fail. So here's what you need to do. How, from a professor's perspective, do you feel that has resonated with you at a space like Oxy?
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes Oxy so successful and liberal arts so successful, that personal aspect. Because I do think the education side you can get at other places. It reminds me a little bit of during the COVID year where we were teaching online, and I felt like I was able to get the teaching across, but not the personal connections. And so the online didn't compare either. And so I'm very happy to be back in person, and I'm able to build these relationships. I get students who, let me know if they're sick or they're going through some tough time, and then I help them out. Extensions, or now we're able to call video in. So if a student gets sick and they don't want to come into the classroom and they're still well enough to be able to watch the lecture, they're able to video in through Zoom. So we're able to have that. And I just have such amazing relationships with my students. Like I would honestly like that to me is the reason I got into teaching, just because, and specifically teaching at a liberal arts college, which is it was a conscious decision for me, because when I got my PhD, I was able to teach there, and students at large institutions are not used to talking to professors. And to me, that was so odd because at liberal arts college, you talk to your professor, you go to your office hours, they know you. And so when I was teaching at UC Santa Cruz, I felt like the students there are not used to talking to professors. So my office hours were empty. They're going to have it, other PhD students who have these sessions, extra sessions, and they also have office hours. So they are more comfortable talking to PhD students than they are to their own professors. So when I had the opportunity to, once I graduated, I had opportunity to go to Georgia Tech. I don't mind sharing my story. It was Georgia Tech, Colgate, and Occidental College. And while it was tempting to go with a big name, and it actually paid a little bit more, but to me, what Oxy offered was exactly what I wanted, and I took Oxy, and I have made, I would even say, friends with some of my old students. They come and visit me. They send cards, they send updates, and so I'm able to create that relationship and partly a friendship. There's still that professor student where I have a little more power than they do. So it's not quite like an equal relationship, but I would say that I build relationships and they're lifelong relationships. And that's something that you can have at a liberal arts institution and not at these major universities.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And one thing I would also say about Oxy that was very, I think, unique to my experience is when I was about a junior, a group of students and myself, it certainly wasn't just me, but knew that we wanted to create a major that sort of resonated with what we were studying, this idea of Chicano history and social justice and women's studies. And so one thing we were able to do at Oxy was advocate for what they now called critical theory and social justice, which in the end was my major. I was the first graduating class of a CTSJ major, but it was also a student-led initiative saying, we're studying and learning all of these things inside and outside of the classroom, and Oxy through some advocacy, backed us and helped us create something like that. Those are the types of things that I was able to get. You want to start a club, you want to start a major, you want to start experiences, you as a student have a voice to do so. Have you, as in economics or within your department, seen any of that growth or change?
Yes, absolutely. So I think since we're so student focused here, any sort of initiative that students are interested, like I tell them sometimes that really their only limit is their imagination as to what they can and cannot do. So I do push my students to think more critically about what they can and cannot do. And really, they can do almost anything. And because we're a liberal arts institution and we have a little bit more funding and more money than a university for these types of things, because that's what we want to encourage, I've seen a lot of activities and actions from our students. I teach economics. I'm in the economics department. Recently, a group of our female students said, we want a club. We want to have a Women of Economics club. And so they started one and we encouraged that. We helped, facilitated that. So we see that. Other students said, well, the research and internships are very important to us. And for some of us, we're not interested in the sort of finance business side of things. We're more interested in nonprofits, working in nonprofits, but some of these nonprofits don't pay any money. And so we created a fund that helps students who want to do their own research. So we help facilitate that. And so we pay for students to travel abroad, to do research abroad in whatever topic they're interested in. But also if they end up working for a nonprofit that's not able to pay them over the summer, we would help pay for that. Like we don't directly pay like a salary, but we would help pay for the students' food, for the students' lodging. So these are the type of things where the students engage in something and we are happy to try to make it work out. And many times we can. It's really the students who might have a harder time thinking of things that they want to do and they want to engage in. But that definitely at Occidental College were quite student-centric, I would say, rather than centering on the faculty and on the research side of things. We're more interested in the student and student development and student growth. And so we really spend a lot of resources and also time. In terms of the faculty time, we compensate the faculty to be spending time, right? When we talk about tenure, you mentioned tenure at Occidental College. Part of it is the research that I've done is why I received tenure, but also the amount of time that I spent with my students and advising them and encouraging them to think outside of the class, think internships. I tell my students to, those summers that you spend between years are critically important to where you're going to end up after Oxy, even more so than the particular major that you end up doing, because that's going to create some experience. And most of the majors here at Oxy, they're going to prepare you to work in any industry. So the summer internships and summer research is what's going to guide you as to which direction you're more interested in. So, yeah.
And I actually had a personal experience with that I'll share in a bit. But students and audience members, I also want to remind you that this is an interactive podcast. So we're going to talk for another couple of minutes, but I also want to pose some of your questions. So as several of you may know, I'm also a college access counselor. And so not only did I want to create this space to share these stories, talk about why we're here, but I also wanted to offer an opportunity for you all to ask questions about your Oxy acceptance letter, your financial aid, or just in general, how to make this very difficult decision, And I think Professor Mora and I can both sort of speak to what guided us in that decision. But one of the reasons, and actually this is speaking of research that sort of led me to think about Oxy as an option, was I had a misconception. I thought small liberal arts colleges, you don't do research. Instead, you are just a student in a class, you're writing a lot of papers, you're right. Like when we think research, we might think a UC or a large institution, and that is 100% not the case. And in fact, I learned that firsthand when I did what you did. And I applied for a summer study abroad program. I went to Costa Rica for a summer. My professor backed my application, helped me devise sort of a research project. And from there, I was given a stipend to go and live with the host family, to teach abroad, and to conduct research that ultimately led to my thesis on education and teaching. And so I think I was very pleasantly surprised that, all of the things I thought I couldn't do at such a small community, I could do more. Not only that, but when I was comparing between Oxy and in my day, it was actually UC Santa Barbara. That was my other choice. And nothing against them, but when I walked on campus and I saw the classes in place, I realized, oh my gosh, if I came here, I would be one of hundreds of students in a large auditorium crowd. And I noticed that not all of the teachers who were teaching there were actual professors, they were TAs and students working with the professors. So I say all of that because research was definitely a big part of why I chose Oxy. And for you, I think you mentioned Claremont College is where you ended up. What were some of the reasons that sort of reared you in that direction? And then we'll go to some Q&A.
Sure. I love your comment about research, because Oxy in some ways is focusing more and more on research. We have the summer research program, which pays students to do research, and housing and food and a stipend. I think it's like $5,500 to do your own research. So that's more like payment rather than paying for the cost of doing research. And I have students recently that went to South Africa. One went to Panama. One's about to go to Barcelona, all to do research. I've done research with students on a regular basis. I actually just published one paper with a student, and that student got accepted to a pre-doc at Harvard. So research is a huge thing here at Oxy. But that's not your question, but I just wanted to add that. Your question was about Claremont and why I decided to go to Claremont. If I'm being honest, I didn't know much about a liberal arts college. I mentioned it was partly about luck. And I remember going to visit the colleges, the Claremont colleges, when I was in middle school. So to me, that sort of was a big thing where I went to middle school. When I was in middle school, they took us there. We did a little tour, sat in the classroom and things like that. And to me, I just love the campus. I love the atmosphere. It was sort of like what you expect from like a movie of what being a college student was like, but not like the party school type movie, but more like just more sophisticated. It's more classrooms. You get to know the professor. You have these super intellectual discussions. And so I was really attracted to that. Ultimately, I went to Claremont College just because they gave me the most financial aid. And so that was my main driver. They paid for food, they paid for housing. I was very low income, and it just was great. Everything was just kind of clicked in together. I found it interesting, intellectually stimulating, and they gave me money, and so I ended up choosing it for that. At the Claremont colleges, they also focused on research, though I think that more focus has been like, I don't know where they are at the moment, but Oxy right now is doing more than what they did back when I was in Claremont. But I'm guessing Claremont now has also increased sort of the amount of research that students do and what they fund and things like that. They didn't fund as many things as we do here, and like I mentioned, the South Africa, Panama, Barcelona, and we pay students to, like, this is through the system, which is, if you want to, I'm not sure, Andrea, if that's how you did it, where you go through the study abroad, essentially, office, and then they help you find this. So, it's not like you're just showing up in Panama and trying to find an internship, right? Like, you go there through a program, Oxy sort of helps you through it, and you apply through Oxy, and, they set everything up for you. But they also have, if you're the more adventurous type, to just give you some money for you to go and do your own research. I remember a student who went back to, her grandparents were from, I forget which exactly African country it was, but they had gone through a civil war, and her grandma was still living there. And then they decided to go back and do sort of video interviews and talk about what it was like to go through civil war. And so those are the types of research and experiences that you get to have at liberal arts institution. And that's just the fun outside of the classroom type of experience. In the classroom, they're going to have super stimulating conversations. Professors will know you. You can expect to talk in the classroom at least once a week, if not once a lecture. And I'm known for cold calling, so not all professors do that, but you will have a lot of interaction in a liberal arts college. It's going to be a very active experience rather than in a large institution where you're going to sit back and just take in the lecture from the professor, right? It's very, very much a hands-on, active. We make, or essentially you as a student makes what you want out of your college experience here.
Yeah. And so the name of the grant that I actually did, it was called a Richter grant. So if you're a student in the space and you're thinking, oh, I want to study abroad and I want to do research, that was what I did. Is I applied for a Richter grant, had a professor be my advisor, so to speak, and guided me on the application. And then that's how I was awarded that. And I did also do it through sort of an outside program that supported my travel abroad experience. But you know what, I got some funding to do it, and that was incredible. And so one of the questions that actually came in was about financial aid. And before we get there, I just want to ask you one last thing, Professor Mora, because I know, again, it comes back to your story, right? You grew up with two incredibly hardworking, parents who were farm workers. You had that education in the back of your mind. Is there any sort of last experience that you had that you feel is that you want to share with the audience today that you feel is important for them to know?
Yeah, I think the only other thing is sort of thinking about my interest in econ and economics. Part of that, it's again in the background, is what I was interested in economics. I didn't know what economics was, just like I didn't know what liberal arts was when I went there. But I took a class, and so again, just by chance, so to me, it's you can't really go wrong. And so I would say experiment, take classes that you wouldn't take otherwise. And if you don't like it, don't take another class. Take an econ class, you hate it, don't take another econ class. Like, you'll know you hate it. But if you don't know what econ class and then you never try it, you might not know. But to me, thinking about, inequality and my parents and why they had to drop out of school was something that it was always in the back of our mind. We would go to Mexico on a quite regular basis every year, sometimes every other year if we couldn't. So to me, the travel back and forth between the countries was fascinating. I always had this thing of like making observations and trying to understand why things were the way they were and why some things in Mexico were cheaper than some things in the US, but other things were more expensive in Mexico. So we would buy like jeans to my family because jeans were expensive there, or like CDs back when we had CDs. These CDs were more expensive in Mexico than they were here. So there's all these observations that I would have that I found fascinating that just kind of didn't, I was trying to understand them. And so to me, it was just like trying to understand the world, and economics provided that framework to try to understand the world. And so to me, it just, I was naturally driven to it. So if I would provide some advice in terms of, I don't know if you're going to ask this later, but I was thinking more like major, what you could do is just follow your heart. Just take a class, find something you find fascinating and interesting, and continue taking another class if you like it, and don't if you don't. Eventually you'll figure out a major. That's why we give you 2 years to figure it out. You try out a few classes, and you never know what you're going to fall in love with. And is the same advice I would give for finding jobs after college. Like, that's why internships are so important. You don't know. It's okay that you don't know what you're going to major in. It's okay that you don't know what you're going to do after college. And it's fine that you said you were going to be a lawyer and you've been telling everyone you're a lawyer, and then you decide, I don't like law and law school. That's fine. You're young. I mean, I think experiment with jobs, experiment with classes, and you'll know. Like, you don't need anyone to tell you. You will know that you hate this job and you don't want to do it, or you love it and you want to keep doing it. Same thing with the classes. So just follow your heart, try something. As long as you're trying something, you're not going to go wrong, right? It's the fear that you're not going to get that job, you don't apply to places, and then you kind of stay at home and do what you're comfortable with. That's where you're going to miss out. But if you try something and it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. You are, as long as you're trying something, you're winning. As long as you're moving, you're winning, right? And so don't worry about failure. Failure is great. I think I learned tons from that. Which majors not to do, which jobs not to do, who people not to date, and so forth.
All of it, all of it. And thank you so much for sharing that too, because the last thing I want to say is have an open mind, right? Your freshman year, it's not about, just finding things that you're interested in, but to be honest, you might be placed in a class just because everything else is full, and you get into this class that changes your life forever. That's what happened to me. I was placed in an environmental ethics class and had no interest at all in it when I was a freshman, but it was the only one that had space. I fought with my advisor about it, and they said, give it a try. And that teacher actually became my advisor for the Richter grant at the end of the day. And I say this wholeheartedly, no matter where you end up, if you are a student, have that open mind and know that you don't have to have it all figured out right now. That is the beauty of a liberal arts college, truly. And so one of the questions that came in, so this is the fun part. Thank you all for hearing our stories and hearing sort of what resonates with us. Now we want to hear from you. I did have a question come in about financial aid that said, earlier, or Oxy is my primary choice, is my top choice. How can I advocate for more money, right? If financial aid is not quite there, what does it mean to advocate? And here's one thing that sort of I tell all of my students, well, two things I should say, is you have to find your people on these campuses. What do I mean? There are financial aid offices, there are admissions offices, there are study abroad offices. There are actual people who work there that care about your success. However, they're never going to know what's going on with you unless you tell them. The beauty of a small liberal arts college is there is a process called an appeal process. I wish I would have known this, trust me, when I was in college. I'm sure my parents would say the same thing. But it is called an appeal, and you can essentially advocate for more money by sharing more about your story. Sometimes we forget to include details on our FAFSA or CSS profile. that are important to our family circumstances. For example, I have a lot of students whose parents send a lot of money home to Mexico or El Salvador or Guatemala from their income. And so small details like that, or perhaps there are students or there are other people in the household that your family is supporting that weren't necessarily indicated on financial aid FAFSA or CSS profile. So there is the option of an appeal, but there's also the option of picking up the phone and getting to know your financial aid officers. Back in the day, it was a woman named Maureen for me. So my advice to you is find your Maureen. Find the person in each of these campuses who will be your best advocate and will sit you down and hear your story and understand that. Do you have anything to add about that, Professor Mora?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I would add now you probably want to email more than call.
You're
That's
right.
sort of more the norm. But I think a lot of people are there for you. They're there to help you, but we don't want to force you to do anything. So we're not going to tell you to go study abroad. But if you're interested in studying abroad and you come in, people will help you out. In terms of the financial aid stuff, my advice is to just send emails. And even if you don't know who to email, send a few random emails to different places. Admissions at occi.edu. I don't know. I don't know if that's an email, but just look for something like that. And you email me, email a professor, even if I don't know, which I probably won't know anything about financial aid. I can push that somewhere and ask someone as to who would be the right person. So if you send to a few people, eventually someone will respond and someone will help you out. So don't be afraid to ask any questions. We're here to help you in any way we can. And there's a lot of support for you, but you have to be the one that walks in. We can't force you to go into our office. You have to walk in, you have to ask the questions, you have to send the emails. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do anything.
Yes, thank you. Another question came in. What is the most popular major at Occi right now? I guess I would say something back in my day, it was DWA, Diplomacy and World Affairs. They have this really awesome sort of study abroad experience, but in Washington, D.C. So is that still the most popular major at Occi, or are there other?
Well, it's not. It's not actually. Economics, which is what I teach, is now the most popular major here. And that program is still there. So they do work with people in the Hill or the UN, and so I have economic majors that do that. So that's opened up to non-DWA majors as well, just people that are interested. So the economics is sort of the most popular major. I don't know if like COVID and things, it might change things. I'm not sure. But as of now, we have been the most popular major.
And you forgot to also share this, Professor Mora, but can you share a little bit about who leads your department? It's unique.
So right now, our chair is Professor Lopez, who's a Latina from Riverside, interestingly enough. So we have two Latinos here in the economics department. And it's a very diverse department, which is actually rare for economics. There are very few Latinos that get PhDs and even fewer that get PhDs in economics. So we have that. It's a very diverse department. And so we're trying to get a more diverse student body. But yeah, so woman Latina head of economics.
Very unique, and also again sort of a testament to what Occi's philosophy is, who's leading and who's showcasing your teaching experience. Right. Yeah. So I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So students, audience, if you have any questions, either feel free to unmute, or drop them in. And in the meantime, I will also leave you all with sort of one last piece of advice. At least on my end. And I think this is especially if you are a senior here, and I'll sort of cater it to the audiences, but if you are a senior in this audience, deciding between a liberal arts college or a public institution, the truth is you can't go wrong either way, right? Wherever you get your education, it's going to be special and unique to your experience as long as you make it your own. And you own the power of your voice in that space. Where you might end up at a very large institution, the only way you'll make it through is by, as what Professor Mora and I said, is making sure your teachers know who you are, your advocates know who you are, and your peers others know who you are, right? And that's going to be important at a small liberal arts college too, where your voice might be a little bit more amplified. You'll have spaces to make direct change and immediate change. That doesn't say that wherever you choose, you can't create that space for yourself. So own your voice. Secondly, know that you belong. Whether you're in this room today and you're the first in your family to go to college, or you're like me who, had parents who were blessed to get an education, but at the same time had to sort of leave their community, leave where they knew to get that education. No matter where you are in your walk of life, I hope that wherever you end up, you worked hard and you belong in that space. Okay, so take up space wherever you're at. What about you, Professor Mora?
I would say part of it, I guess I'm talking to my younger self when I was in college. My advice to you is embrace the struggle. That it's okay to struggle. It's okay to get a B. Many of you will find that you're struggling for the first time that first year you go to college. You're going through a lot. You might be first gen. It is going to be hard. And if you're struggling and it's hard for you, you're in the right place. Just remember that, right? Because the way I compare it is like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you're not sweating, you're not doing it right. Okay. So you should hope that you'll be struggling. And when you find yourself struggling and you find yourself getting those first Bs, you don't want to be thinking you don't belong. It doesn't mean you don't belong, right? Now you're with a bigger group, a more competitive group. Chances are it's a bigger, more competitive group. Like in my class, I'll give you an example of my class. My intermediate level economics class, the average is a B, right? So if you get a B, for me, at least when I did it, I was used to getting A's, not trying that hard. And then I'm getting B's, and I even got one C plus. I'll admit to it. Because it was hard. I had some bad habits. I was able to not study or study last minute and do great. Let papers last minute, and I got A's in high school. And then I went to college and it didn't work. And it took me time to do that. But in college, if you get a B, you beat half the class. Like, that's pretty good. How could you not belong with getting a B or a C? Like, you're still beating most people. So embrace the struggle. Don't feel bad. You're going to struggle, and that's good. It means you're going to be outside of your comfort zone. It means you're going to be stronger. I mean, there are limits to how much you're struggling, clearly. So you don't want to push yourself too hard, but some difficulty and some struggle is good. It means growth. It means you're getting better, and you're going to succeed in the future. And just remember, when you get that first B or C plus, Professor Mora got C plus once, and he's a professor now. So, it was just about grades. Grades just don't mean what we think they mean. It's not about intelligence. Grades don't mean intelligence anymore, especially not in college, because you're going to be going through some stuff. Some of us are first gen. Some of us have to work because we need more money. Some of us are going through mental health issues, physical issues. Grades really, really do not matter. What you do in the summer is way more important than the one particular grade. Clearly, you don't want to fail. But my advice is to embrace the struggle and don't let that discourage you from thinking that, you don't belong there. You belong there. You made it that far. It's amazing. Your story is amazing. And so keep going. Just keep trying. And I promise you will succeed. I don't know how I got here. All I know, I never planned to be a professor, certainly not when I was in college getting that C. But I kept trying. I kept going. Nothing discouraged me. I kept applying to jobs, to college, to graduate school. And I got plenty of rejections, but I kept trying. Even when I got rejected, I went, well, forget them. They're lost. I applied to another place. And somehow I ended up being a professor. And I really don't know how that happened. But it did. And the only thing I did that I see differently is that I kept trying.
Yes. And embracing that journey. And speaking of journey, really quick, I did have a last question that popped in, and we'll end it at that is, can you elaborate on the student experience? And I'll share a little bit about that as a former right scholar. But Professor Mora, you are so involved in the student experience now at Oxy that you can probably testify more to this. But here's what I will say about why I love Oxy so much is the level of community is on a whole other level. The fact that we were call it a good thing or positive or negative, but for me it was a positive. Living on campus for the first 2 years and being required to do so made a huge difference for me. I have all of my best friends to this day were students that I met at Oxy also, how can I forget this, offers a first year summer experience. This is the summer before you start Oxy, called MSI. It's called the Multicultural Summer Institute. So if you are a senior in this space, you should be receiving an email about that soon. And the Multicultural Summer Institute is an opportunity for you to go early to Oxy, live on campus for an entire month, be taught by professors like Professor Mora, and actually get credit for community work that you're doing. My entire class was focused on getting into the community and learning about sort of my identity and space at Oxy. Again, the level of connections that you make at a small liberal arts college like Oxy is like none other, and I'm so glad I did that. Not only that, you are in the heart of Eagle Rock and in the heart of Pasadena and Highland Park. So nightlife was fun. I'm going to be honest with you. We had a lot of fun in the community. We had a lot of fun together at our collaborative community parties, and events, right? I was part of leadership organizations that were about women's empowerment. Right now, I think the program is called Latinx Student Union. Before, it was called Mecha Alas, where we had events specifically for the Latino population. I mean, all sorts of things on campus. I can't emphasize enough how powerful that experience was. My parents would probably say they wanted me home way more often, but I didn't want to be home. Instead, I wanted to be in that space. How about you, Professor Mora, really quick? How is the student life now?
Yeah, it exactly as you're describing it, but a lot of it is just whatever students are into. So yeah. If you want to start a club and anything that you're particularly interested into, we will help you with that. Some students are interested in finding like jobs, so they'll do a more job type of interaction. Other students are more into the community. The Latinx Student Union is one of those, but there's plenty of others that if you're interested in dancing, or there's like a K-pop club, there's like anime clubs and video gaming clubs. So there's a lot, and Oxy sort of understands the importance of community building, and having these clubs are a big part of that. So they help finance, they have collaboration amongst the group, they collaborate with departments. In fact, I don't know, we haven't mentioned how Andrea and I met, but it was sort of through these collaborations. And we in the econ department have decided that we wanted to have more interactions with alumni, and especially alumni of color. And that's how Andrea and I met, where I partner with groups here at Occidental, and we went with OCLA, which is the alumni group here at Occidental, which Andrea belongs to, and it's part of the board, if I'm not mistaken, still. And so we just reached out to them and said, let's collaborate. And so we brought amazing alumni to Oxy. Andrea was one of them. This was actually in the middle of COVID because we did it remotely. And we had this amazing group, all Latinas of making decisions. We called it the Visible Hands Initiative, where we just wanted to see, this was just a Latino group. I've done it with Asian and Black students as well. And Andrea was part of it, where she talked about her experience about starting her own business, and what that's like, and what it's like to make decisions, which economics to me is the study of decision making. So we had a couple of CEOs, Andrea, who was a former CEO, people that were making all these very tough, very important decisions, and hiring and when to fire and managing budgets and things like that. So there's a lot of interaction. The limit is what you want to do, because again, we don't want to pressure you to do something you don't want to do. If you don't want to be part of MSI, you don't want to be part of this. But the more you put into Oxy, I think the more you get out of it. And so I encourage you to wherever you end up going, to be very active, right? You have to understand that it's more than grades now. The grades don't matter that much. It's about building community, creating networks that are going to help you in the future. I mean, I was talking to some, this was the Black student alumni, where they decided to start a new business, and they used their network of people, and they did this amazing nonprofit, and it became one of the largest nonprofits in the US, I think like 15th largest in terms of funding. So you never know who you're gonna meet, and even though they're kind of just your buddies and you're partying it up and just dancing one night, and then suddenly 10 years from now they're like the CEO and they're working in something similar, and now you're partnering to do some new project, and amazing things can happen. And again, like the limit is your imagination, and so be active, meet people, go outside of your comfort zone, make lots of friends, do research, go on Richter, do a Richter. They still exist. The Richter's still around. Their departments have money, so there's just so much that you can do. That the real problem is, especially for first gen, that they don't know what you can do. So this is where you have to find people that are willing to help you and to talk to you, right? So I talk to a lot of students, especially first gen. It's kind of something that I'm kind of a little soft spot for first gen students. And so I interact with them as much as I can. I go to OCLA events and just to meet more students and also alumni. And I meet students who are not in the economics major, and there's a couple that I meet on a regular basis just to let them know and help them out with their resume and tell them when to apply, tell them it's fine to get rejected, tell them to just keep going, and it eventually will work out, because I see it, and it does. As long as they don't give up, they keep trying, and it's going to work out. So just find that person that makes you believe in yourself and pushes you to be more than what you think you can do. Because I think for me that's really a big part of the reason why I'm here. Just people believed in me and pushed me to be more than what I wanted to do, and it forced me outside of my comfort zone. It was uncomfortable, but really, if you're first gen, many of us, especially for me, my dream was to work in a place that had air conditioning. That was my main goal. I got that. So I don't want to work in the field. That was my big motivation. It was really tough. But people said, hey, no, you can't just like settle for Target, right? I don't want to pick on Target, but someone said, you can do a little bit more if you just push yourself. And I didn't want to, but they said, apply here. And I'm like, fine, I'll apply. I'm probably not going to get it. But I apply and I got it, and I keep applying and I get it. And sometimes I get rejected, but just keep pushing yourself. And Oxy will help you, and you'll meet professors who will push you. Sometimes it'll be professors, sometimes it'll be students. I'm sure Andrea, on those nights you were partying, other nights you were like, you could do it. Come on, let's stay up late. We'll stay up late. We'll study together. We'll work together. We'll work on a problem set together. So you're going to get people that push you to have fun, but they're also going to have people that are going to push you to be more than what you want to do, and to just find that little extra push that you need to get the problem set or paper or whatever you need to do to get that done.
I mean, and I'll also sort of make it clear really quick is like, I mean, when I say fun, it was also like, again, going into the community. I had free tickets to go see concerts at the Hollywood Bowl, thanks to Oxy. And I had free tickets to go to museums and explore the community. I mean, it was just, those are the types of things I got, and being part of all the clubs and orgs, right? It was more than just a nightlife at Oxy, because I was a little goody two-shoe too. But I will say, when it comes to that life, it is what you make it,
Yeah.
But yeah. So, gosh, with that said, that was a beautiful ending to, I think, a really awesome sort of showcase of Oxy. But again, the reason we're here is to say, look, we have stories, we have experiences too. We're here to help you. So, Professor Mora, do you feel comfortable dropping in your email to the chat box?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then same thing for all the students. I'm dropping in my personal email as well. So if you have any questions about the student experience, of course, you have to follow Professor Mora on TikTok if you want. And then you can also follow my Instagram as well, where I do like to post resources, support. I'll have more of these conversations with other admissions officers and higher ed folks in the coming days. So if you want to be part of that newsletter and want to know what's happening, drop me a DM and let me know that you're interested. But with that, thank you, Professor Mora. Thank you for sharing your story, sharing your insight, and expressing the love we have for Oxy and liberal arts educations, period, truly.
Absolutely.
And students, families, parents, whoever's here in the audience, thank you for joining us today. Have a good evening.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrea. And thank you for the audience here as well for coming. And I think you just coming here says a lot about who you are and what you want to do with the future. So just keep listening to people, and you never know who's going to push you in the right direction, and hopefully we pushed you a little bit in the right direction. So best of luck, and shoot us an email and let us know where you end up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, students, you heard it from the professor himself. We're here for you. Bye, everybody. We'll see you later. Thank you for tuning into this inspired conversation where I interviewed an incredible changemaker in higher education. I'm your host, Andrea Cova-Bernal, and for a list of upcoming interviews, follow Inspired Conversations Pod on Instagram and click the link in my bio. If you are tuning in today and have questions about college applications, college success, or financial aid, you're not alone. I've been a college access and success counselor for many years, and I've got your back. Email me at counselorcova@gmail.com. Again, that's counselorcova@gmail.com. Remember, your success is our community's success, and you got this. I'll see you next time.